Hi, I'm Alex James and welcome to What's Your Story. Today's story is about adoption and my guest today is Nick Endacott. Hi Nick, thank you for coming all the way to see me. Nick, when people talk about adoption, and this is where I want to start because I think people think, oh, if you've had a good life with the family you're with, why would you be bothered about finding a family that perhaps didn't want you, couldn't look after you, or for whatever reason have given you up? And we talked in the beginning just a little bit about how in all of us there's that innate driving force that you just want to, it's genetic, isn't it? It's the genetics of it. Yeah. So tell me a little bit, let's start at the beginning, tell me a little bit about your adopted parents.
Well, they were lovely. My upbringing was very good in the countryside, the Ashdown Forest.
Did they have other children?
Yeah, 2 sisters and a brother.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was getting a little bit older, so she wanted to have another boy to make it 4, so decided to adopt.
And what year was this?
That was around, well, I was born in 68, so it would have been, I was adopted at 18 months old, but they had me a little bit before that, to see how it went, and then I went back, and then they had me again, and it was to see if they could were good, to adopt, and good parents for me, and whether I was could settle in there. So I was adopted then finally at 18 months old.
So you've got this lovely, I want to paint like pictures, you've got this lovely couple, mum and dad, and how many children did they have?
So they had 2 girls and a boy.
2 girls and a boy, who are older?
Yeah, my eldest sister's 12 years older than me, and then my other sister's 9 years older than me, and my brother's 4 years older than me.
So their children were growing up.
Yeah.
And they decided, let's adopt.
Yeah, it was. We've got 2 girls and a boy. I think at that time, back at that time, you when you got to a certain age for women, you didn't. I mean, I know women having children, later now in life, but then it was. She thought she was getting into that time where it was. She wanted, but they both wanted another boy to make it 4, but because of her age, thought it would be nice to adopt. So they did.
So they applied to adopt, and then they had you stay with them for a little while, and it sort of all worked, and then they took you home.
There was quite a lot of hoops they had to jump through, and it wasn't just a case of they could go to a home, say, oh, we want to adopt a child. Yes, we'll have that one, please, and okay, yeah, and then you go home with the child. It was quite an ongoing process to go through.
So did they come to the home and meet you, and with a social worker or something like that? Then
there was a home in I was born in Woolwich, and there was a home in Beckenham, and they went to. They're obviously applying as parents looking for a child, and went to Beckenham to the home, and it just literally it went from there. It was a case of starting the process, filling the forms, them getting to know who they were, what sort of family it was, where they lived, and whether everything fitted the criteria to be a good family for them to agree to adopting
So what did your adopted mum say about you when she first saw you?
She said, I chose you. Well, in fact, my auntie said she chose me, and my mother said she chose me, and there was this little sort of debate about who chose me, but I said, I don't mind who chose me. Yeah. But it was one of those things that really, for me, I don't remember being told that I was adopted. I don't remember being told that this is what we did and this is how it happened. I've just always known that, So it was at a very, very young age that I was, that I knew that I was adopted.
So just jumping forward a little bit, because I want to go back to your childhood, if that's okay. But when you decided that you were going to try and find, we talked at the beginning about the genetics of just wanting to know. To know. It's not that you want to join another family or become another person, and it's not that it hasn't worked out. It's just that thought in your head of, I have a genetic family out there, and it's wanting to know. So when you decided that, we talked about how that's like a driving need in you. So when you decided to do that, what was your adopted mum and dad's reaction to it?
And that's another thing. I've always known that they were always all right about that. That they always said to me, if you ever want to find out, who your birth mother or father is, then we'll be behind you and we'll help you as much as we can. That was always. They didn't know. They didn't know. No. But I've always known that they would be behind me if I ever wanted to search or find out. It was never one of those things that that was a difficult subject to talk about or anything like that.
So you didn't have to worry about hurting your adopted mum or them feeling that we've done all this for you and now you're going off to find
I obviously felt that. They were my mum and dad, and if I did want to do anything about finding any information out, that I wouldn't go and do it without telling them. And that's the other thing, because I always knew that they were there for me to help me if I needed it. I could go to them and say, well, this is what I'm thinking about it. How do I go about it? And go. It wouldn't be something I would go off and do behind their back because I'd be worried about hurting them, because that wasn't ever an issue.
So tell me about the little boy that you were then in that family.
I was a little rascal. I was a little wild child. No, I was a good little boy. I loved the forest. We lived in a little village on the Ashdown Forest and loved it there. I was in the woods every day. Playing in the woods and out all the time till it was dark.
So you're an adventurer.
Yeah. I've always loved nature. I mean, that may have come from my childhood, but I've always loved nature and animals and that kind of,
and
being
does
out.
Does that come from the adoptive family? From your adoptive family, are they nature lovers? And
I think they are. I wouldn't say that. My brother was never. He was out and about when he was younger, because that was our playground. The forest was our playground. He was out and about, but he wasn't out all the time.
And there's an age difference as well, isn't there, between you? So,
and I don't really remember my sisters, their childhood, because I was too young, and when I was a little bit older, my sister, my youngest of the two, was in a boarding school, a ballet school, and my eldest sister was in university. So they weren't always at home, so I didn't really know much of their childhood unless one of them came home for a bit or had a friend over when they came over and that sort of thing.
So they were quite middle class then, your
not overly, but my dad worked for the GLC. He was a quantity surveyor. My mum was a secretary on Charlie Heritage, the school there for mentally handicapped and physically handicapped. And she was a church warden as well in the village. Organised everything that went on at the church and the flowers and everything like that.
So you had this very nice childhood. So what were the differences? Because you said to me before that you were aware that you were a little bit different to the other children. So even if you hadn't known that you were adopted, some of the things that you were doing were different to their own children. I did. I was a bit. I did feel different. I was into different things. I had different interests. My brother seemed very. I don't know. A bit nerdy, a bit sort of very academic. They were all very academic. I mean, we
really sort of academic. But my brother was almost too serious about everything, and he sort of never felt, and I never felt that I could have a laugh and a joke with him. And the same with my elder sister. But then, like you say, the age difference, it was, and I didn't really see her that much. But the younger of the two sisters, when she used to come home, we were inseparable. She'd play games with me, and all the attention would be on me. But she was quite creative. She was a dancer, so the creativity was there. But
creativity,
but I was, since I can remember, I've been creative myself. Really, really overly, passionately creative in lots of different ways.
So what sort of things?
Music mainly. Mm-hmm. I was singing since I was 6. So
were you in the choir?
I actually joined the choir when I was 6, till I was 14. And the one thing I always used to love about that was the harmonies. It was I just loved singing with other people, singing harmonies, and all of that going on. It was just, I loved it. But of course, I was a soprano then. Till my voice broke. I had quite a piercing soprano voice, and I loved it. And singing, anything musically orientated, I was into from a very, very early age. And none of the rest of the family were. I mean, my sister was creative, but not musically in any way. And my brother tried the violin, and talk about screaming cats. He was terrible. He tried it for a bit, and
did they support that? Did they like it that you were more of an adventurer and very creative and singing?
Yeah, I mean they were. When I was about 7 or 8, I wanted a drum kit. I wanted to play the drums, and I was hitting things all the time, doing rhythms on tables and in the car, and they used to tell me to shut up, and so they bought me a little drum kit when I was about 8 years old, and I was doing that for a while, and then went on to guitar when I was 9, and they saw that I had this creative interest and this musical interest, but I don't think they knew what it was that, particularly because I was drums and then I was guitar and I was singing and then I had interest in this and that, but it was all so they couldn't really pinpoint what it was. I didn't sort of say, hey, I'd really like to learn the guitar, and then I'd get a guitar and then that's all I do. It was anything musical.
But when you were doing it, you felt it was flowing through you then? It was something really that you were passionate about?
Yeah. It's something I've felt from since I can remember, that this musical creative passion really it's always been there. And
of course you've gone on to become a musician. In your own right.
Yeah,
so that's really
well,
really
I taught myself guitar from 9 and carried on with that. And a lot of people, at school, and was meeting other people at school, other people playing instruments or getting together with people. They all wanted to cover other people's songs and play other people's songs, and I never had really much interest in that. I wanted to create. So I started writing songs when I was 11, and always really preferred doing that. I wanted to create songs, not copy songs.
So where did you perform these? Were they at school?
Well, firstly, I was at school. I was in various musical productions. Nicholas Nickleby and such like. And so the acting and singing side was the acting was there as well. The interest in acting and singing. So I was in a few productions of Nicholas Nickleby and initially, but this interest of playing an instrument sort of was always going on. But until I got to an age where I wanted to get a band together, I wanted to play with other people.
And were your mum and dad okay with that?
Oh yeah, I mean, anything that I was interested in, they would help me with, encourage me with. And well, yeah, they would encourage me, but my dad would obviously interject and say, "You make sure you get a proper job, though." You know, a proper job. Yes, I will, Dad. Don't worry. So is it? Yeah, it was. I don't think they ever saw it as being something that I would have a career as, because of their generation and the age that they were. They were older parents to compared to other friends I had. You know that.
And it sounds to me more like they were into education and stability and
yeah.
You know,
they were older parents, so it was the the traditional way of going through school, university. You know, but I had this music going on all the time, and I followed that alongside school and everything anyway, and always, you know, did. And they encouraged. They bought me a guitar, and you know, and I went to you know, acting events and you know, weekend classes for acting and singing, so that, as well as the choir.
Did you do well at school? Or?
Yeah, I did until I enjoyed humour more, in a sense. I was in up to about the third year at school. I don't know what that would be nowadays. So
don't ask me.
So I was about 14 or something. I was doing really well at maths, science, and everything, but I was having more fun entertaining people. You know, I wanted to entertain people in class. I wanted to you know, joke and entertain.
Did you get into trouble?
I did, yeah, all the time. You know, constantly moving me to the front of the class, and or having to stand outside the door, and you know, for mucking around. But I was just wanting to entertain. Really, I enjoyed, you know, entertaining, and you know, eventually then my status went downhill in lessons, and you know, I wasn't in the top classes anymore. But I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed it all. I enjoyed everything, but I didn't really think it was serious. I didn't really take a serious view of it.
So you've been adopted into this lovely family, and they're quite special, aren't they? Because they have facilitated everything that you've wanted to do and helped you. So when did you start to think, I want to find who my birth parents are? I want to find out who my mum and dad.
Well, all my life I've wondered about it. You know, even when I was quite young, I'd be wondering who they might be. It's been on my mind all my life, really. To actually do something about it, I didn't feel there was any. When I was young, I didn't feel there was any rush to do that. I always wondered who they were, or you know, all of that, but didn't do anything about it because there was no. You know, I thought, you know, at some point I'll look into it. You know, and I think when I got to 18, 20 years old, I was starting to think about doing something about it, and I'd go to the Samaritans and, you know, knock on the door and just say, look, I'm adopted. What do I? You know, is there a way that you could help me find, you know, and well, you know, there's ways you can do it. You can fill in a form, you can do that. So I was just inquiring around that time.
It's that thought, isn't it? And I've said to you, because I found my birth mum as well, and I think it's something to do with, it's very difficult to explain if you haven't been through it, because people might say, you had a lovely mum and dad that chose you. Why? And it's something to do with, I remember, and I've said this to you before we started the interview, so I just want to check out if it's something the same for you. But I remember looking at women and thinking, I wonder if you're my mum. And also, when I found my mum, looking for those similarities. And there were little things that she did, even her voice. And it's something, even though you might have everything else, there's something about needing to have that piece of your puzzle, isn't there? So was it similar?
Well, it's the identity thing, It's I love my mum and dad. Everything was great, and it wasn't a case of, but I need to find someone that I'm really from because they're my real.
No.
It was nothing like that. It was more of a case of,
curiosity.
Yeah, I love my family, and everything, but the curiosity of but who am I really? The actual identity is so important when you haven't got your identity, you don't know your identity. It's difficult to understand that for anyone who knows their mum and dad or know where they're from. They could perhaps relate to what you're trying to explain about it. But to actually understand what that feels like, they wouldn't know, because.
So is it that same thing that I was saying to you about just thinking, I just want to see who they are?
Well, I always thought that I probably looked more like my mum. I'd had various feelings through my life that I probably looked more like my mum, or I was. She gave me up because she was young, and it was out of love, and it was better for me to be, in her situation, that sort of thing. Not that I knew any of that. It's just sort of, through
That's
my life,
the story
I thought
that you told.
Yeah, and that it made sense to me.
Because adopted people,
yeah,
even if they don't want to say, and there are going to be people watching this who are adopted, and they are going to be thinking, I've always wanted to go that route, but I don't want to upset my family. We said that in the beginning. Your family were very good. Some families might be very upset at somebody doing that. So that is the dilemma, isn't it? But it is that wanting to know. So you had this story that you kind of made up in your head of what your mum and your. So tell me the little bit about how you found your mum.
It was a rainy Sunday.
You decided to go and do it. Let's backtrack.
All right.
You decided you're going to go and find your mum.
Well,
Been knocked at the door of the Samaritans.
There was a point where I did actually get some forms through. And this was from somewhere in London, Australia House or something, where all the births, deaths and records are kept. I contacted them. They sent me these forms to fill in. Really long forms, and then the waiting time was like 6 weeks for that, and then you get another form, then there's 12 weeks for that, and another 8 weeks for another form, and it was form after form after form. And I just thought, I'm going to find out another way. There's got to be another way of doing this than going through all these forms and everything. So I thought about that for a while, probably for a couple of years, and then this around this time I was older. I mean, I was middle 30s, so I still hadn't done anything by then, but thought about it a lot. But I was very busy with music and other things in my life, and it was something that I wanted to get on.
Do you have a family of your own?
I have a lovely girlfriend, and she has 2 daughters.
Are they your children?
They're not my children, no. I haven't got any children of my own.
Not yet.
But and she's very supportive as well. She for someone who knows her identity, she really is very understanding about how it feels, not to know that. So I was in my middle to late 30s, and it was a rainy Sunday. It was my birthday, so I was thinking about it. It was my birthday, and internet by then was, growing up without internet and without, mobile phones and all that sort of thing, again, that's why it was all forms and postage, and, it was a lot different then. So thinking about it then again, and there's the internet and I've got the computer in front of me, I just decided to do a search, and I found this site, missingyou.com, I think it was, or something like that, where you could put up messages on a board. And I decided to just put up, does anybody know? And I knew my birth mother's name from what my mum and dad had told me, but that's the only information I had. So I put up the message, does anyone know of in the Beckenham area, and I was in a home in Beckenham, and just all the information I could, to see if I got a reaction. And it was, I think, probably a year or so after that, I then got an email from my birth mother saying, "Are you?" Which on my birth certificate at the time, I was named Aaron, so it was Aaron, not Nick. And she asked me, "Are you Aaron?" And I immediately thought, "Is this her or not?"
What was that feeling? Were you really excited?
It was both. It was shock and excitement at the same time. It was, my heart was racing. I was, if this is actually her, my God, is this really her? And it was, but then what do I do? How do I approach this? How do I react to this? And I emailed back, and she sent a photo, and I could see myself definitely in her, and that sort of kicked it off from there.
And what did your birth parent, your adopted parents, think when they saw the photograph of her?
Well, they were in a state of shock as well. But they were, like I've said earlier, they were very supportive and right, okay, so they got all the records out and got all the information. They checked that they didn't obviously want me to be, wanted to make sure she was who she was saying she was, and went through everything and gave me all the information again so that I had it, so that I could check with her. But she was living in Kingston, and she was moving to Spain about probably a week or maybe 2 weeks from the contact.
Wow.
So I had to decide really quickly, do I meet her before she goes, or do I meet her in another country? I always thought that, and I think it would be wise to initially, if you have that contact, to start with some phone calls, and get to know each other a bit by phone, and before any meeting is, over a few months, that's what I was expecting, that sort of thing, and then you would meet, so you can take it in. And I had no time to take it in or anything, because I thought I have to meet her before she goes, because I don't want to go over to Spain and on her territory to meet her for the first time. It had to be, I didn't feel I wanted to do that.
And somewhere in your mind was there that question, like, why? Is that one of the questions that you wanted to ask her? Why I was put up for adoption? That was one of the main. Absolutely, yeah. So I suppose I was thinking, alongside seeing what she looked like and getting the recognition, but having to almost be cautious as well, because you seem like you're quite caring and sensitive as well. So it was a lot of emotions. It's very open-ended, isn't it? You'd have to kind of think, well, I'll go and meet her, and then I'll see how open she is to talking about it. I talked to my mum and dad, and we all decided that it would probably be best, because of her moving, that I do see her before she goes. So I psyched myself up for it, and arranged to meet her in Kingston in a hotel. And that takes a lot. When you say psych yourself up, I mean, people just kind of don't realise the anxiety that creates in you just going to do something like that. Yeah, because it's your real parent. It's your real birth. And there's all the excitement along with the fear of almost a second rejection again, because you don't know what the reaction is going to be, do you? No. When you're going, even though they say they want to meet you, you don't know. It's so open. It could mean anything. They could be any kind of person. You don't know what you're getting involved with, but because of the lifelong curiosity and wanting to know your identity, it had to happen. I had to. You're driven. I think that's something that you've got to be careful, and you've got to weigh up everything, in emotionally and in every way. Think very
sensibly about it. But
because I described it to you, from my perspective, it was like if you move a slab, in your garden, and everything, all the little creatures run out, and you can never, even though you might want to think, oh, that isn't the story I wanted, and put it all back, it will never fit exactly like it was again, because
you don't know what you're opening
out.
up.
Yes.
But if you don't go ahead with that, then are you going to think 10 years later, I wish I'd got to know who they were, and I wish I'd done that, because do you want to be kicking yourself later on, or you find out they've died or something, and I never met them. I think you've got to give it a go, but be careful, be very careful, and be cautious.
And now, of course, they have counselling services, don't they? That you can have before you do something like that.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to distract you because we're getting to the point. So you go to meet your mum. Where did you decide to meet?
Well, she lived in Kingston, so it was a hotel in Richmond. So, and I knew Richmond anyway. I've been there a few times. I like Richmond, and so we arranged to meet at a hotel. And
describe that feeling when you're walking in. And was she there first?
Well, I got there and went for a coffee, and a girlfriend at the time came with me, and it was very surreal. It was very, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what was going to happen. It was a very strange feeling, but I just thought, I've got to do this. Like I said, psych yourself up to get yourself prepared for whatever it might be like. And went to the hotel, and she was already there. And
so was she in a room? Was she?
It was like the foyer. It was like a little part off from the foyer, so it was a public area where you could sit and you could have a drink or.
So walk me through that. You walk in through the doors, and you're looking to see.
I saw this woman looking at me like that. I thought that's I recognised her from the photo, but I was shaking. She was shaking, and sat down. And
so what happened? Did you hug? Was it emotional?
No, didn't hug. We just sort of. She was sort of just couldn't keep her eyes off me, and couldn't believe it. I was there, and it was a very, very wasn't awkward, but it was very strange, and it was very. I was trying to be so careful of what I said and how I came across, and she probably was as well. So we were both being very cautious with each other, But we started talking. She asked how my life had been, and what I'd been doing. And I asked her about hers, and it was a very sort of polite chat, for a while. And then I asked about, that big question,
That must have been very awkward. I imagine you have to work round to that
because you can't just suddenly come out with it, And I said, look, I've got to ask you what was the situation, why did you feel you wanted to give your baby up,
And what did she say?
She said, you got to remember at the time it was 1960. I was conceived in 67, so 67, 68. It was, for her, but she was only 19, 20, around that sort of age. It wasn't looked at very well to be a single, mum in the 60s.
And there wasn't the support systems that there are now.
It was all very, very different. So she was the way she put it was she was in a difficult position because at her age and because she was her parents lived in Scotland, and she came down to London from Scotland.
To work?
To work.
So what did she do? What did she do for a living?
She came down and started working in the Speakeasy, which is a Speakeasy. It's a club in London, which is a lot of the music industry. People in the music industry go, musicians, everyone to do with the industry, the music industry, go there. It's like a music industry canteen almost. Everyone who was anyone went there and debuted there and started their careers either there or the Bag of Nails, which is another London 60s club, or other various clubs in London. And that was sort of it was a members club, though, this one.
So when she said that to you, did you suddenly start to think, oh, I wonder if she's a musician?
Well, I did, and she said, and she wasn't. But she said she worked at the Speakeasy. There was, she met a lot of musicians there, knew a lot of people in the industry there, because that was the clientele,
and it was a fantastic time.
It was
musically,
being a musician myself. If I imagine being around at that time, a mother working at the Speakeasy, and I'm a musician, and what that would feel like. It would be, mixing with all the people, all the stars that have become, obviously at the time, they were just musicians and bands at the time, but going on to be these big stars, would be amazing. I mean, she knew Jimi Hendrix. She knew her friend shared a flat with him, and knew him very well, and he debuted there at the Speakeasy.
So you were having this wonderful conversation then about all the different people.
All started to come out about the 60s element of everything, and I thought, that just makes so much sense to me now. That's why I've always had an interest in the 60s sound, that the 60s music. I mean, I had Beatles, records passed down from my sisters, and Kinks, and all that, Walker Brothers. I was always interested in listening to those records from 8-9 years old anyway. But the fact that when I became more of a musician and was writing my own songs, and it always had this feel, this 60s feel to it, if I tried or not. And so I always thought that it's got to come from somewhere, and when she was talking about where she worked and who she mixed with and everything, that side of it anyway, where I come from her anyway, was from that. I know I was born in '68, but she could have been a secretary somewhere in wherever else,
but the fact that
she was in the thick of the everything that was starting up and becoming such an iconic time. She was right at the beginning of it all.
So what was her reaction when you said, so who's my dad?
Well, initially she said who it was, and said he was a musician, and had achieved a certain amount of, I wouldn't really call it fame, but he had a career in the industry, but didn't really tell me much more other than that.
So did you then go in search of him?
Yeah, well, because I didn't have much information. See, you got to remember, at the time, it was a very surreal moment. It was a very strange time of talking to her and chatting. It was all felt very strange, and I came away from it thinking of so many other things I wanted to ask. So
it's like a tidal wave, isn't it?
So I didn't really pressure her on who or what or more about him. It was within the conversation of everything being like,
but you've got this golden nugget. You have a name now.
Yeah.
Who you think your dad is?
Yeah. Well, I had that certain bit of information, but it was only a couple of years. Yeah, it was about a couple of years later. I went to see her in Spain, and we were chatting about everything. She was then talking more about what she'd done and who she knew and everything, and then gave me sort of more information about the father. So I then pursued that. Yeah. But then it was another 2 years before I then connected with him.
So was that because it was something that you kept leaving and going back to, or was it that it just took you that amount of time to locate him?
No, it took me that long to find him. It was yeah. I did the same sort of thing. Put lots of messages on various internet sites, various sites that would deal with the kind of music he was doing or the time he was around, that sort of thing. And then,
but for you now, emotionally, you know where your mum is, your birth mum, and you've got this name for your dad, and you're hoping now to meet him. So, did you keep in touch with your birth mum while you were doing all of this?
Yeah. We're not in contact all the time, but I'd go over various times to see her. And
did you actually get on with her?
Yeah.
And had she got other children, or?
No, she's never had any other other children. And she did marry the year I was born. But then they divorced some time later. Not sure how long after, but they've remained friends to this day.
So going back to your story, you eventually find this man that she says is your dad.
Yeah, and he lives in Brighton, and basically I got a message from this lady that said that she knows him, and why do you want to contact him? And I was back and forth with her for a bit, and then eventually she gave me his mobile number, and then I called him and we chatted.
Did he know that you were going to call?
She did. Obviously, yeah. It wasn't out of the blue. What?
A bit of a shock.
It was all arranged that I would be calling, and he was flabbergasted. He was like, "Oh my God, wow, this is amazing!" And
was he excited?
Yeah, he was. Yeah. It was. We got on really, really well. We were having a laugh on the phone, within 10 minutes.
And you arranged to meet?
Then arranged to meet.
Was it the same feeling as when you went to meet your birth mum?
No, it wasn't. It was similar because it was, the butterflies and what's this guy going to be? What's he going to look like? And all of that. But because of the way we spoke on the phone, because I'd never had that with my birth mother, you see, I never spoke on the phone with her. It was all emails and then meeting. So because I'd spoken to him on the phone, I'd already gauged him a little bit more as a person, and we got on. So it felt, I wasn't as apprehensive, definitely. Excited and cautious still, but not as apprehensive.
So you got yourself down to Brighton to meet him.
Yeah, went down and met him at this cafe, and he was this tiny little thing. So
what had you imagined he would look like?
I thought I would look like him. Or I thought there would be something. As soon as I saw my birth mother, I could see. Even with the picture, I could see. Because
we talked earlier about you having this fantasy that you would look like your mum. So when you saw this man that your mum says is your dad, what did you think?
He wasn't what I expected at all. I was expecting him to be sort of dark featured or dark hair, like myself, but he was small and blonde, and didn't look like him at all in any way. But I knew I looked more like my mother anyway, so it didn't matter. But I wasn't absolutely not what I expected at all. But as soon as he saw me, he had to look away, and he held his hand up to his. He says, "Oh my God!" He says, "I can't believe it." He says, "You're splitting image of her." So to him, because he hadn't seen her for 40 odd years, immediately saw her in me. So for him, it was a very sort of surreal moment for him as well, because he just saw her straight away. But
so did you bond really?
Yeah, we got on fine. It was, we talked about music. He talked about his family.
And he was a musician.
Yeah, he's a musician. Well. Yeah, he wrote. He's a writer as well as a singer. plays guitar.
So it fitted.
It all made sense.
He didn't
sense
look
to me,
how
even
you
though he didn't look
imagined.
like. Yeah, it just made sense, and I
It
trusted
fitted.
my birth mother. I just thought, I went with what she said, and he initially said, "Look, maybe we should do a DNA test just to make sure." And I said, "No, I don't. That'd be fine. I don't. I'm sure it's all. I trusted her what she told me, and
you've got your story.
yeah,
now,
and it's like it all makes sense. So yeah, wasn't going to worry about that. I mean, it wasn't an issue for him. He just said, maybe we should. I said, no, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
So you spent quite a lot of time in his company.
We saw each other quite a lot. Yeah, I eventually moved down to Brighton.
Was that to be nearer to him?
Well, yeah, he said he's working a lot of music stuff. He's doing a lot of things, and I said, well, where I'm living is nothing's really happening here. I was living in Tunbridge Wells at the time in Kent, and I'd had bands, I'd had things going on, and that particular time wasn't really doing a lot, and it was it's almost like you get to a point where you go out and you don't know anyone anymore. The next generations come up, other people have gone off, got married, whatever, and the musicians were, there weren't really any sort of decent musicians that I knew of anymore. And I was in the back of my head, I was thinking for a couple of years actually that, it'd be good to get down to Brighton or somewhere creative,
Because Brighton is full of creatives.
Yeah, and it was on my mind for quite a long time to do something like that. But it was, it was more expensive. I mean, Tunbridge Wells can be, but various pockets in Tunbridge Wells are, okay. And I thought, well, if I do go down to Brighton, I don't want to be, I want to have a decent place, But it was just affording at the time. All my work was in Tunbridge Wells, and so I sort of felt a little bit trapped in, there. But after meeting him, he said, look, I know a guy who's got a flat that. He rents to me if I want it cheap. Do you want to rent it? It's free at the moment, because he's now with his girlfriend and he doesn't, he was renting there and he's
so
moved in with his
really wanted you in his fold, didn't he?
Yeah,
really
absolutely. Absolutely. Open arms. Yeah, absolutely.
And what did your adoptive dad, what was his reaction to that? Because you're now moving away and more.
Well, I spoke to him about it all and said, look, this is the situation, and told him everything that was going on before I met him, and then afterwards, and what he was suggesting and everything. And no, he was fine. He obviously be careful. He's very. My dad was always looking ahead all the time. He'd always prepare for things and look in advance and then arrange in advance things and make sure everything.
So their only concerns were selfless, really. It was all
yeah,
about
it was
you
make sure you've checked
okay.
this guy out. Make sure this isn't. You're not moving somewhere that's. Suddenly you're going to be stuck and it's all been and you're going to get let down. Yeah, of course, it was all about. Don't walk into something that's going to emotionally affect you later on and feel like that rejection again, because because there is a rejection feeling there when you're adopted. Whether you're brought up in a lovely home or not, there is that.
There's that question, isn't there?
Question
Why didn't they want me?
Yeah. Just to be careful, really, and. So I was constantly talking with my mum and dad about it, and before I did it, and it was fine. They were behind me, and then I moved down, and it was a nice little flat, and I set up my studio there, and I was living there for 2 years, right in the middle of Brighton. So that's coming from Tunbridge Wells to Brighton. I've been there a few times and liked Brighton, but. I was right in the middle of what's called the Lanes in Brighton, which is creative. There's a massive, I think it's the biggest music shop in Europe now, I think, or guitar shop in Europe, called Guitar Amp and Keyboard Centre. It's now referred to as GAC. and there's so many guitars in there, you can't, it's just full, it's a massive place. And I was literally next door to it. So
did you kind of have this feeling of, I'm whole? I actually have found my roots.
Yeah.
And
then to live then in the creative city, and my birth father was around the corner, and it was So
it fitted you like old shoes.
Yeah, it did. Everything felt good about it, And he would be round a lot, and then we started to work on some stuff together, started to write together.
Wow.
Which was amazing to. That feeling of, I'm working with someone I'm related to, blood-wise, is amazing feeling. And, I've always thought that when you see, brothers and families and everything in the music industry, and how they're lovely, how their harmonies are, and how everything works so well, it must be a blood thing, that it works so well because they're related. So to have that feeling of I'm working musically with someone I'm related to was amazing, And we did write quite a few sort of songs and get some stuff together, and it was great fun.
But then there was a devastating blow.
But then what happened was everything was fine. We were getting on fine. It wasn't as if we'd fallen out or anything like that. But it was just, I think it was an evening with my girlfriend. We're having a bottle of wine, and we were talking about how I didn't look like him, and how he was short and blonde and I was tall and dark, or in relation anyway. Should we do a DNA test just to check? So I thought, maybe we should. It was just that an evening of talking about things, and there were things that didn't make sense. Although I found myself creatively, and there were other things which didn't feel right. I can't put my finger on them because they were subtle things. So I talked to him about it, and he said, he said, I think we should have done that anyway. I'm quite happy to do that. So we did it, and I think at the time I wasn't sure whether it was that I wanted it to come back as positive or I wanted it to come back as negative. It's a very strange feeling, because I should have been wanting it to come back positive, but I felt there was something missing, and I've always sort of felt that, even to the extent of when we used to hug to say goodbye, it still felt like I was hugging a man, not my birth father. It's very hard to explain.
No, I can get that.
It was. I didn't feel. I thought, I kept questioning, why is it that I don't feel the warmth I should be feeling, or the connection I should be feeling?
So it's just something that you knew. Did you feel that when you hugged your birth mother?
That was different. Everything about that connection was different to the connection.
So there was something missing for you.
Yeah, and because it was so subtle, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I just felt there was something not quite fitting in some way. So we did. Yeah, he was quite happy to do the test, and we did the test, and I wasn't sort of expecting anything. I just wanted to know the result, really. But yeah, it was very strange not to feel that. Oh, I hope it's positive. I hope it is, because he's meant to be my. And it came back, and it was negative. He's not.
What a
wasn't
blow
my father.
for you!
Yeah, I couldn't believe. I had to read it over and over again, that it was actually saying what it was saying.
And what did that do to your relationship with him?
He was actually fine. He was actually. He's always been really, really good.
So he's quite laid back.
He's lovely guy. Always had this. We got to know each other we'd known each other as father, or biological father and son, for 2 years.
When you was it you that got the result?
Yeah.
So you had to go and then tell him. So what did you do? Did you go and see him?
Yeah, I took the letter around and shown him, and he was shocked.
That must have been really awful. It must
He
have been awful for you, even though you say you had this hope, because everything, it's almost like, you've still got the relationship.
Yeah.
But some of it has just gone whoosh.
2 years of getting to know someone as your biological father, and then...
Yeah. And you're back with the void again.
Yeah. So it was very strange. He was, but the good thing about it was he was very supportive and very, right. He says, like, I'll try and any help I can, anything you need, I'll try and help. Because his memory of that time was, it was a long time ago, and he wasn't always, he was touring quite a bit, and he wasn't always in London, and he wasn't. So it was hard for him to try and help, really, in perhaps thinking about who else was around or what was really going on, at the time. He always knew, he was told he was the father, and that's all he knew or thought.
So did you go back to your mum then?
Yeah, and
so tell me about that.
She said she couldn't believe it. She said no. She said it's always been him. And I said, well, it's not. She said, but it always had. It's always been. I can't. I don't believe it. I said, well, I've got the DNA test to show you. She said, well, I can't think who it could be if it's not him.
How did that make you feel?
I was quite surprised at her reaction, actually. She withdrew quite a bit from me after that. I didn't really hear from her as much. I didn't see her as much.
I suppose you've got your very loving adoptive parents to fall back on, but that's quite difficult, I think. You seem to be quite light-hearted about it, but I'm guessing, looking at you, that actually it is probably a bit painful to think, is this woman...
It's been a bit of a roller coaster, really.
Yeah, and now she's saying, "Well, I don't know who it is."
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. She wasn't. She didn't sleep around. She wasn't. It could be one of hundreds of.
So did you think she knows, but she doesn't want to say?
I did think that because she wasn't like that. She wasn't going around. She wasn't that kind of girl. No. So. If you're not that sort of person, then you would have, or you should have, a good idea, really, who it is. If it's not someone, you would have an idea. Well, it must be such and such then.
But she didn't even give me that. Be the other person? Do you think she wanted it to be this man that you'd been having this 2 years?
She said that's all she ever thought it was my birth father. She said that it can't be. She said it can't be anyone else because it's always been him. But so I was a bit of a dead end because, a bit of a strange reaction from her, really, because she didn't seem to want to give me any other idea of who it might be if it wasn't them,
and now this has left you with a massive void.
Yeah, it was.
And why wouldn't you want to then explore and find out?
Well, I was, Thing is, when you haven't got, when you've got bits of information, and then those bits of information then end up, not being true. You're left with your mind running wild, of who could it be? What, it could be anyone now. Then, it could be absolutely anyone.
Did you start looking at all of the people that were in the music business at that time around that area to see who do I look like?
I started looking at all the people that I remembered her saying that she knew or worked with or
it wasn't Jimi Hendrix.
It definitely wasn't Jimi Hendrix. No, but other people she mentioned Spencer Davis Group, she mentioned Traffic, Cream, various.
So there were several of them.
Yeah, and Dave Clark 5 and all these different, bands and that. So I started looking through all these pictures, another glass of wine with my girlfriend, and thinking, right, let's get into, doing our own research, because I had nothing to go on, and the only way of trying to find anything out was doing my own research.
And then you just came to this dead end.
Well, initially we saw this picture of the Dave Clark 5, and I'm splitting image of Dave Clark. Well, from his age when I was younger looked just like Dave Clark. So we sort of pursued that for a while. We got hold of a journalist, David Wigg, who knows Dave Clark, and through David Wigg and his correspondence with Dave Clark, sent pictures and everything, and he was very nice about it all. And that was over about a year or so of going through that. He said he didn't think it could be him, but it got to a point where he was willing to do a DNA test. But that was lots of various different people. We thought that but you start
People
to
have been
lose.
very kind, haven't they, to generally in trying to help you.
But when you haven't really got anything to go on, you start to, well, I've got the same eyes as him, or his ears look like me, or the way he sings is a bit like the way I sing.
And of course now you're saying with your certain illnesses that you've got, which obviously we're not going to talk about those, but certain things that there's also another area that you need to explore genetically, because you want to know about genetics.
I've always as well, it's not just identity. I don't think it is for any adoptee, really, not just me, but it's not just identity. I think it's your medical history as well. That's something I've never known, never had, because that wasn't there. Nothing was on file about my birth mother or birth father for any other any sort of underlying conditions or anything that can be genetically passed on. I had no information like that, so I'm growing up blind medically, really, to anything that could genetically come about.
I mean, what a journey you have had.
Yeah.
And I think that because I know the end little bit of this, and that is that now, some time ago, you did find out who it is. Yeah. And to try now to connect in there is a difficult process for you, which is why we're perhaps not going to talk about this in this, we're still waiting to see what happens there. But how would you see yourself now that you think you know who this is? How would you see yourself fitting into that? Would that fit with you? Would that feel like, I know now that's it?
Like I said about, initially meeting who I was told was my birth father, although we got on so well and worked together musically and did things and shared humour, there was still something that I couldn't put my finger on that was missing, that didn't, a lack of a form of connection that I wasn't feeling. So it's almost like I knew, I had this inner feeling that something wasn't right there. With new information I have is totally different. Feels completely different.
And we're going to end on that now, because obviously for personal reasons you're not going to be talking more at the moment about who your extraordinarily famous father is. Well, I look forward to hopefully having a more upbeat interview with you next time. Nick,
I like that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
being so honest. And if you're adopted and you want to talk about that, please do get in touch. And Nick Endacott, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.